I'd like to now announce the first panel of this conference, Bridges to Financing a Sustainable Transformation. Chair of the panel is Birgit Niessner, and I would like to invite her on stage together with her discussion partners, Nadine Wiedermann-Ondrej, Glod, Klaus, Kumpfmüller, and Jürgen Schneider. I would like to welcome you on stage and ask you to take a seat. The chairs are named, so you can find your name card on the chairs. And I am pleased to hand over to the moderator, to Birgit Niessner. She's the Director of Economic Analysis and Research Department at the Austrian National Bank. Before, she was 15 years in various positions in risk management and research functions. She's a real expert, so I hand over to Birgit Niessner. I'm very happy to see so many faces and a great mix of different people. Just before lunch break, we're the last point on the agenda before the lunch break. Maybe we're not very. We have here a good mix of experts on the panel. So we have great people here, but not a lot of time. Therefore, we will have a short panel slot. We have one block where I will ask a question about financing. We have one practitioner from a bank on the panel, and then in the second part, we will speak about laws and regulations. For me, it's important that we have a different result than 2 months ago. We had a panel on DEI, and Trump's presidency was still very present, and we left the panel quite depressed. I hope that we have a different tone today, and I hope. Well, we have heard alarming figures today about the tipping points, for example. There's nothing to be added, but I hope that we get to the point where we say, what are the next steps and what are we already implementing by the institutions that are represented in the panel. So here I'd like to present the speakers. Glod, Deputy Director of the Luxembourg Environment Agency. Glod says in Luxembourg, renewable energy is promoted and administrative hurdles are reduced in Luxembourg. And the European collaboration is especially important there. Welcome. From Linz, we have Klaus Kumpfmüller. He's chairman of and CEO of the management board of the Hypo, Upper Austria. So you can see here the logo already. And he says the green transformation of our economy has no alternative, and the finance sector is the decisive lever. But he wants to invest his energy into the transformation and not into bureaucracy and reporting. Welcome, Mr. Kumpfmüller. Then here I have the regulation expert, Nadine Wiedermann-Ondrej of the Ministry of Finance. She will speak in the second round because she knows the finance markets and is actively forms the regulatory field. Finance markets are not just a green topic, it's a strategic answer to the European geopolitical challenges. Thank you and welcome. Last but not least, Jürgen Schneider. Welcome. Head of climate section. He is the highest representative for climate in the state of Austria, and I'm very happy that you're here today on this panel. You say in times that are economically challenging, it is important that we keep on track for climate for investments on climate change, and that we actively pursue investments in this area. Welcome. With this, I will start with the first question. I will start with Mr. Kumpfmüller. Do you feel in your area that climate protection is losing significance? And what do you do to counteract that? What kind of finances are important in the green field? And how do you adapt these investments to the new times?
Thank you so much for your invitation and to be able to talk about the practice here, the real world, how the regional banks such as the Hypo of Upper Austria, Oberösterreich is treating the topic. We are coming from a phase of a euphoric phase. When I think back to 2021, the Green Deal of the EU Commission, everybody was in good spirit, the clients were in good spirit, the employees, everybody wanted to do something about the topic, and they also acted on it. And for us as a management, we had a focus on this topic, and we still focus on it, and not only we as the managers, but also the employees, and of course also the owners of the bank, which in our case is the region of Oberösterreich, Upper Austria, who has the majority. So in all banks where there's institutional investors, this topic is especially important. All banks you looked at in the ministry have an climate strategy. Of course, you can discuss if they're actually carrying out the climate strategies, but all banks are committed to financing the transition. I would like to explain how we as a regional bank thought about the topic, approached the topic. For us, it was very good that the Green Finance Alliance was announced a few years ago, because as a smaller bank, we don't have the opportunity, the possibility to develop everything ourselves, to build the know-how, the knowledge we need within our bank. So for us, the Green Finance Alliance is a very important tool, because we also gain input, we get expertise internationally and nationally. So I'm a big fan of the Green Finance Alliance, and I hope in the next years and in the new government we will keep going with this. There has been skepticism in some banks, so that is why we only have 11 members at the moment, because the political part has been put too much emphasis on, and a lot of colleagues were preoccupied what would happen. So I hope the more members will be created soon. As the Hypo Oberösterreich, we are a Hypo bank. We are focused on real estate financing, and we have a big credit portfolio in terms of real estate. And so with green finance is a big lever for us, because this plays a big role in the transition to green finance. The topic energy efficiency and real estate is very important. So on the one hand, we tried to create the data we need, because there is tools to find out about the energy efficiency of buildings, and these tools should be used for what they're actually for. A tool I think a tool that is regulated and clear should remain this way and should not be used for other sectors as well, in order for us to gain figures we can actually rely on. So we have the data of this financings we have done in the past, and we are doing. So we have determined which types of financings we can transition to green financing. So, for example, we have 2 covered bonds, which are for energy efficient buildings and are used for them. And when it comes to clients, private clients, we have a few different bond products, and also for savings that are also certified. So I think we have good green finance products for financing energy efficient buildings. But within the framework of the Green Finance Alliance, we could introduce is the commitment to the finance-based target initiative. We did this last year, and our core business, which is the credit business, we measured 0 where concerning the CO2 emissions. We could define our goals for 2030, 2040 on how the reduction in our credit portfolio of CO2 emissions should work and what we want to achieve. And we are permanently working on the monitoring when it comes to the goals and measures of this transformation, and define them and monitor them. And I think the biggest challenge for all of us is to create the data where market standards are just developing now. It is very an ever-changing sector. So we are working on that, and I'm very positive. And I think we are still very euphoric. Our employees are still working hard on the topic. It is important for them and also for us as managers to make a contribution to the transition and do as much as we can when it comes to climate protection and finance. That was exactly what I wanted to look at in the practice. You also work together with federal institutions. Mr. Schneider, I think we would like to hear your opinion in terms of the federal government. Do we have to adapt to the new times? Yes, of course. We have heard it quite a few times. This week we had the speech on the budget in Austria this week, and we have a lot of need for consolidation, more than 6 billion euros, and a lot of it has to do with the environment sector. Also the sector where we get the funds for our activities from. We will try to have an impact even if we get a lot less money. We already talked about it with journalists yesterday. How would we do this? There are some sectors that do not need funding anymore. For example, photovoltaics. New technologies have to be led to the market, and then once they're part of the market, we don't have to subsidize it anymore. And now, at the moment, we have another challenge with including all this energy into the grid. We don't have as much public money available as we did before, but we want to subsidize concretely and to the point. So we don't want to limit the quantity of subsidized activities. And in the end, it's clear that even bigger companies have to transform. They don't need they don't want to be needing subsidies forever. They need support for some time, but at the end, we have to create market conditions where climate-friendly production and consumption is more profitable than the contrary. So we're working on the legal framework. We will be having a new activity system in 2027 of the regulatory framework. And if you listen to Sean Kidney, now renewable energies and technologies have the least costs of energy production. They're the cheapest option. So we need to create market regulations where investors know for sure that it is easy to get confirmation. So I hope So it's not the government's task to finance everything and subsidize everything, but to provide subsidies in the first phase, in the phase of transition, and then afterwards, once it is normal that I'm investing in renewable energies, no subsidies are needed anymore. We're still working on it, but we have already achieved quite a bit. Thank you. Before I would like to talk to our foreign guests, I would like to talk about Europe, from the Clean Deal to Green Deal. What type of funds, from your perspective, will be needed or will be available or will not be available? Maybe I'll start with the regulatory framework. That's actually part of the second question, I know, but I would like to mention that how important is sustainable finance? Is it as important as it was? You already talked about it. A Green Deal was a very important piece of work. Talking about taxonomy and all kinds of types of topics, sustainability, green bond benchmark, and green claims directives. There are a lot of guidelines and directives on these topics, and now we have those geopolitical challenges, and with von der Leyen we have a new strategy, and the strategy is, we all know, competitiveness. And if you look at that, we have 3 goals, which is also not a secret: closing the innovation gap, decarbonization and competitiveness, and reducing excessive dependencies. And this is very interesting because sustainable finance is not a goal in itself anymore. Of course, we can say reducing excessive dependencies, yes, we are depending on fossil fuels, and competitiveness and decarbonization also relates to the Green Industrial Deal and so on. And also we have horizontal enablers. There are two that are very important to us, the simplification and the Savings and Investment Union. The Savings and Investment Union is seen as one possible solution for financing the sustainable transformation and also the competitiveness. And what I would like to mention in terms of the goals, we have heard a lot of discussions and speeches, and we know that the goal competitiveness and sustainability do not compete with each other, but they go hand in hand, and also the risk they pose. So in discussion that we are having, they often are presented as contraries, as competing each other. So maybe here among us it's clear, but in general discussions on a European level, it's not always clear. And also when we're talking about financing these products, sustainability and sustainable finance is not a focal point anymore. It's about European investments, strengthening the European capital market, also because of the geopolitical challenges. But as SFDR, when we're talking about green finance products, they're discussing things such as defense. So it's more direction of a growing universe of defense. So this is one of the challenges to embed sustainability in industrial strategies.
That was very enlightening, so thank you very much for sharing this. And a little bit depressing. So before our lunch break, we had defense, the word defense mentioned for the first time. I know this is part of it, but what you say sounds like we soften our former goals. That it's less important. So what would you say? Is it less important? Is climate less important? I think that it does need to be less important, but yes, probably in the discussions, it's probably perceived as if we soften our goals or regulations. Now we move on to you, David Glod. You have wonderful, cheap, free public transportation systems. I lived in Luxembourg myself. Could you share the Luxembourg perspective with us on financing and on what needs to be changed? I'm very glad to be able to present the Luxembourg perspective. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you to the Austrian colleagues and our colleagues of the German-speaking countries for the great collaboration on green finance and beyond. So the question was if climate protection has lost importance. In Luxembourg, that's not the case. One example is our national energy plan, who was implemented last year by our new government. It was confirmed by the new government, and this plan includes everything that concerns energy goals and climate change goals. This is a plan that goes beyond the legislative period. Or beyond the government. It is political consensus. It's about energy networks, future plans for hydrogen, hydrogen networks, and so on. For us as an environment agency, the subsidy programs are very important. We accompany them for the government. That's on the one hand the climate mobility program, and then the climate bonus for buildings, renovation of buildings, replacing fossil fuel heating systems. And then we discover and we see a strong boom on photovoltaic mechanisms. We see a lot of subsidies in this area, and now we have 7.5 times more subsidies paid to private households. This is a great result, and this happens even though all the subsidies have already funded by 25%, and we will reduce the budget for it a little bit. So I don't think it's comparable to Austria, but maybe we don't reduce it at the same rhythm, but the idea is to reduce the subsidies on the long run. In the mobility sector, it's the same thing. We have 15% more subsidies than the year before. 1/3 of new vehicles is fully electric. That's great. But what we need to see is that this is driven by state subsidies. It would be great if banks could take this up even more and consider this even more. There is more, I think there is more opportunity to get active on local markets. Climate is a priority, or keeps being a priority for Luxembourg. We are an industry location, a finance sector location. We are one of the pioneers in green finance, and therefore it is a priority for us. Our new LSFI, so our sustainable finance strategy, was presented. It was completed, where we have new highlights, highlights in the finance sector, and the finance sector renews their commitment to green finance. But we want to see the impact, of course. So we want to see what the impact on the industry is. The industry is engaged in climate change and knows that they need to contribute to climate change, to combating climate change. They have a vision of a third industrial revolution: decarbonization, digitalization, and AI, artificial intelligence. Those are the most important factors for the future. And the industrial sector sees the challenges that are posed in front of us. And in this context, if I look back a few years, COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, industrial crisis, this has shown even more that we need a transition from a climate vision to a resilience vision, and to have an ideology behind this, because it's about our imminent problems that are there right now. The industrial sector knows that, and therefore they're forced to invest into this area. Right now, we can clearly see that the industrial sector underlines that the transformation cannot undermine competitiveness, and therefore questions around implementation, about bureaucracy are important. We collaborate closely with the different companies. We know their projects and their challenges for the future. And in these discussions, in the project financing in big corporations and groups, we can clearly see that before that CO2 taxes, resources, inflation were the drivers, and money was easy to get. Now we can see that costs have become higher, and our hope would be that green finance would ease this problem or take out some pressure. But we need to admit that corporations see everything that is connected to reporting and transparency, and which would lead to better conditions on the finance market. It's not viewed as this by the corporations. They see it as an additional burden. I would like to show a graphic between round 1 and 2. We heard what is going on in terms of green finance, and I would like to remind the Austrian situation to show you where we are in reaching our goal. So here we have the prognostics for 21 and 23. It's a little bit different from 21 and 23. We're going into the right direction, but we will not be able to achieve our goal. Therefore, I go back now to the panel, and I ask you for short answers, please. Ms. Wiedermann-Ondrej, if we look at this, should we maybe have more regulations? What would be the regulatory context? Omnibus should be a simplification. Are we staying on track and trying to reach the goals, but we make it easier for companies? Will that be the solution? Omnibus is a synonym for a collection of laws around sustainability, and it is a law that was changed. We already had the example with the open heart surgery, so we have existing laws that we are changing. It's 3 to 4 law acts, the taxonomy, and we are changing the reporting standard. If something is controversial, then you implement the regulations step by step. So that's what we're doing. Banks and insurances have some reporting that need to be published already by big banks, big insurances. For example, 300 pages. The insurances have less pages, but the banks have great, very transparent reports, and there you can click through it and you can find all the important information. With Omnibus, we have tried to stop this. So the banks and insurances are already used to the reporting system. They know that they need to do the sustainability reporting, and now we have included the first big corporations, and we have implemented Stop the Clock. So the third wave is now freezed for a few years, and the second one is a simplification law. And together with the standards, we have 2 components that we can adapt: the scope, who needs to apply it, and the data points. So this gives us a clear picture of how much work it would be. And the sustainability reporting wants to reduce the scope by 80%. So 80% less of companies should do the reporting, and then we also reduce the data points. So this is kind of a call to action to the standard setter. This is a simplification because it's less reporting, but we are starting from the back. First, we need to be clear about our strategy. how do we want to pursue the goal of sustainable finance? And then, based on this strategy, we need to do the simplification. I do understand that 300 pages is too long. We need to change this. But if the scope is only something that applies to a minority, then the banks, investors, funds, or bonds don't have all the information from all the companies in order to make investments. So we are speaking about the scope. This is a very intense discussion, and of course also the data points. Thank you very much. This was in a nutshell. Now we know what the omnibus is. I think Mr. Kumpfmüller has listened carefully. Is this something that is understandable for you? How do you want to assess your customers if you don't get their data? I can make it easy because I am a medium enterprise with below 1,000 employees, so we are below the threshold for sustainability reporting. However, in general, I'd like to make a general statement. In the bank, I have been in the banking supervision, and here in the banking sector, we have an ambivalent relation to reporting, because on the one hand side, we say we want to have only a little regulation, but then we also want to know what we are supposed to do and what we are not allowed to do. So this is contradiction, and I'm sorry for my colleagues in Brussels because they need to work with this and find common ground. This is actually impossible, because you cannot say on one side, I want to have a regulation with only a few principles that are in the law, and then on the other hand, I want to know exactly what is okay and within the law, and I want to have the regulatory authorities that give me guidance in every detail. So this is not possible. I think the mistake that happened was that it was too thorough. The scope, we wanted to cover everything in this law. So green finance, social, everything in one regulation. And I think the correct approach would be to focus on our topic, which is green finance, to get to climate neutrality. Like we see in the graphic, we should focus on this, and I think that would be the right way to go. We can see, if we take a look at the market standards and the market developments, if I look at, this is a very clear example, if I take a look at the sustainability preference on a client who wants to invest 100,000 euros into bonds, for example, then the question is, do you want to have a sustainable fund? Then everybody says yes, of course, but then you need to ask detailed questions. 90% of our customers say it's too many details, I'm not interested, I don't have time to go into detail. That's how we shouldn't do it in the regulation. We should move to a principle-oriented regulation and use existing regulations and simplify them. It's a lot of work, I know. Nobody reads all the different guidelines and laws. Nobody takes a look at what is really effective and what is bureaucratic hurdle for the one who needs to comply with it. My banking assessor said, don't ask this question because it's going to take too long, but I thank you for your answer. Mr. Glod, can you imagine how it is handled in an Austrian bank, moving away from the details to the big principles? So you talked about private customers. This is also a sign that different regulations have. If you have to ask so many questions, that is somehow deterring. I can imagine that. I am not a representative of finance. Therefore, I'd like to come back to the industrial sector. These cost factors are very important if you think about project financing. And it's not just about the current costs, but also the outlook on the future costs. I think it's very important, in my opinion, that the government continues to stand for climate protection, and that this project is moving forward, even if the situation is difficult and other challenges are pressing as well. Climate change is very important. And another topic that goes a little bit into a different direction, but that is important for Luxembourg, the financing the transformation is only possible by regional collaboration. So of course it's important to be engaged on a European level, but also on a local and regional level in Luxembourg. So we are part of the Pentalateral Energy Forum, such as Austria and other German-speaking countries. So Luxembourg is a member and is also supporting this financially. We don't have any coastal areas, so we have potential for wind energy, but it's limited in Luxembourg, and therefore we are engaged in this collaboration. And I'd also like to mention the collaboration in the bigger region around Luxembourg, in the neighboring countries and regions, in France, Germany, Belgium. So of course we have different languages in this collaboration, but it is very interesting. And I looked at this platform before I came here, and looked at the results in terms of transformation. We have a financing program through the Commission. I think there are several opportunities to finance different projects and to put them into practice. So this is almost microfinancing, and maybe green finance should also move into that direction. This is a great project, the Grande Région, and the projects. Mr. Schneider, I'd like to give you I'd like to hand over to you for the last question. We know the climate goals. We know where we stand. We see how the regulations are developing. Is this moving into the right direction? Are we gonna reach the big climate goals? Great, thank you for asking me this easiest question at the very end. I'd like to speak about von der Leyen number 1. So that was 2019, Fridays for Future, Greta Thunberg. Climate was the most important issue everywhere. Now we have climate goals on a European level, minus 50% by 2030 and climate neutrality, net zero by 2050. But we see that times have changed. Von der Leyen 2, so the second presidency, is what is happening now. I cannot understand fully. There are different topics that are dominating the medial and the political discussion. That's security, that's competitiveness. And to secure the European Green Deal I need to have an answer to these questions as well. We have started with the Draghi report, and that's what we are continuing right now. And that's the context in which we are acting. It's a different context. We talked about dis and misinformation. We talked about CO2 pricing. We've got an ETS2, and in the last Council of Ministers for Environment, and they wanted to postpone it. I don't have an empirical study, but my feeling is that the countries that have elections next or the year after wanted to postpone because of the rise of right-wing parties. That's something I need to acknowledge. The European Green Deal is not an answer to security issues, to competitiveness. And then it's a much bigger danger. We need to underline that the energy transition or the climate transition also fulfills these goals. So in Austria, we have a emission trade system. We have CO2 taxes. Therefore, products can be produced cheaper in other countries because they don't have a CO2 tax. So we need to implement some kind of method to counteract this. So 90% of companies do not need to fill in any sheets on how many emissions they do not achieve from the 100%. So 10% cover 90% of the emissions. Ellison said it in his speech, in his introduction. Let's not... And also Mr. Holtzman also mentioned details about the cement industry that is not included anymore. So we need to make simplification where it's possible without losing the focus. We need data to manage risks, to make good decisions about investments. We need a minimum on data points and not 500, not a report of 300 pages. But we need a few indicators that that should be reported by energy-intense industries. And then we've got economy, ecology, and social aspects that we need to consider. I think Sean said it in his speech. We have other regions of the world. We have China. China has an electrification policy and is electrifying at a speed that is incredible. From 8%, they moved to 30%. We are at 20%. And it's not just climate protection. Their driver is that they have $500 million per year in China, and therefore they invest into windmills, solar energy, battery electric vehicles, where you can produce the energy yourself and you don't need to import from Saudi Arabia. And I think that's a great role model for us in terms of innovation, technology, clean technology, but with minimal reporting and regulations, but the most important reporting that needs to be there and needs to be implemented. I was afraid that we would get depressed when we were speaking about Donald Trump, but what you said now, yes, simplification can work. Economy and ecology, and doesn't need to be two opposites. And thank you very much for showing the different perspectives of your working fields. I wish you have a wonderful lunch break now, and I hope you can still ask questions to the panelists during the break.